Hello and welcome. It's great to see you here today for our alumni webinar series. I'm Brendan Paddison, Associate Professor and Associate Dean in the Business School at York St John University. And I've been asked to host this webinar as part of our York St John University Alumni series, Alumni Journeys, Creativity, Careers and Community. And before I introduce today's speaker, there are a few housekeeping matters just to run through briefly. We will be hosting a Q&A at the end of the talk. So if you do have any questions, please do that you'd like to put to our speaker, please do email us at alumni@yorksj.ac.uk, and the team will ensure these questions are passed on to our speaker today. There's also an auto transcript that should be appearing during the talk for increased accessibility. But as we know, these aren't always great at providing an accurate transcript. So please do bear with us if it doesn't translate perfectly. So it gives me great pleasure to introduce you to Heather Barnfield. Heather graduated from the College of Ripon and York St John in 1986 with a degree in art and geography. She currently works for Korn, Ferry, a global organizational consulting firm where she is Senior Director, Intellectual Property Development. She has over 25 years experience in leadership development, consultancy, talent management and engagement. Heather's career began in the newspaper industry, where she worked for 13 years, culminating in her leading the training and development function of one of the UK's largest print media organisations. Heather has previously held the role of Vice President, Talent Engagement and Mobility at Aviva Insurance, based in Chicago. At Aviva, she was a member of the Global Talent Task Force, through which she co-designed the organisation's enterprise-wide talent management approach, working as a client of Korn Ferry. So it really does give me great pleasure to hand you over now to Heather, and I look forward to hearing her presentation and to chatting to you afterwards. Thank you very much, Heather.
Thanks, Brendan. Well, as this is a career journey talk, I guess I'll start at the beginning, really, which is when I first went to college at St John's, and I wasn't going to go to college. That had not been my intention at all, but I knew somebody who was a lecturer there, and I just kind of fell into it. And the subjects I chose simply because they were my favourite subjects. There was nothing career focused about the subjects that I chose at all. So St John's was the best decision I could have possibly made. I mean, it was just a wonderful experience for me and such a fantastic foundation to everything that happened after that, really. I just absolutely made the most of my 4 years there. It was tremendous. So having spent 4 years at St John's studying art and geography, didn't really have any idea at all about what I wanted to do, except I had in my second year done a placement for Phillips Auctioneers and absolutely loved the whole world of auctioneering. And you'll notice that auctioneering did not feature in my introduction, and there's a reason for that, because I wanted to be an auctioneer, and then I found out what I would be earning if I became a junior auctioneer. So I sold my soul to newspapers, and when I left college, I started my career selling advertising for the Yorkshire Post in the classified department there, which I don't think even exists anymore, to be honest. So I started the Yorkshire Post, and then after a couple of years selling advertising, became a trainer, training other people to sell advertising. And then I moved to be a trainer for the group training department, and that was the group who owned the Yorkshire Post, which then was Regional Independent Media. Oh no, it was United Provincial Newspapers then, and then it became Regional Independent Media. And I went on a course, a group training course, and loved the whole concept of the group training, and was spotted by the woman who ran the department. And long story short, she recruited me as a trainer for the group. And so I spent the next few years, traveling up and down the country, running training courses right from Helensburgh in Scotland right down to Surrey, all over the place, and in Wales, everywhere. And I did that for several years, and it was great fun. And it was, working in newspapers was just a tremendous experience. I mean, this was going from the mid-80s through to the 2000s, and it was such an exciting time to be in newspapers. It was just really, really vibrant, incredible people. I felt really, really privileged to have had that experience, and it was such a great foundation for my career doing that. And I moved into setting up the training. I expanded the training department for regional independent media to the extent that when I left, I think there were 10 of us. I ended up leading the training function for regional independent media after having been a trainer for them for several years. I think the last 4 years I was there, I led the training function and had this team of people who were going out all over the country running courses, and it was just really, really hard work, but such good fun. And in the last couple of years that I was there running the training function, we ran a strategic leadership development program for the most senior leaders in regional independent media, using an external consultancy. And I hopped over the fence. There's a bit of a pattern here. I experienced something and I want to be part of it. I hopped over the fence and went to work for that consultancy, and did that for 3 years. And I was living in Leeds, that was my home, but the consultancy was based down near Peterborough. And so I lived away virtually all week, every week, for almost 3 years, and absolutely loved it. And it was, again, just a wonderful, wonderful experience, and really good for my career, because it was really tough. It really, really stretched me. Just wonderful. So, but I needed to come home. I needed to come back to Yorkshire, and I didn't want to be living away from home all the time. So at that point, I applied for a job with a company called Reality. I don't even know if they're still going, but they were part of the Argos group. I think some of you will have heard of Argos. And so the Reality part of that business was warehousing, deliveries, and contact centres. It was home shopping, basically. And I went in there as a leadership development manager to set up. They had no leadership development, and so I went in to set up that function. And the role kind of promised a lot, but delivered very little, to be honest. It was just not a great cultural fit for me at all. So I'd been doing that for maybe just under a year, I think, and I decided it was just time to move on. I mean, it was a good experience, and it got me back to the north of England, but it was not just it was somewhere that I didn't see me staying for very long. And it was at that point that I started talking to Aviva Insurance about a job with them, as I think the title was Leadership Development again. And after, I think, the recruitment process took about 5 months, and I think I had something like 15 interviews in that time, and it was a very, very long process, but it was well worth it, because I had a wonderful, wonderful time working at Aviva in leadership development, supporting initially, I think it was the sales and marketing function in Aviva, and again, focusing on people development, running courses, coaching, a whole variety of things associated with people development, really. And then I moved into talent management, and this was a really pivotal point in my career, because I became part of the Global Talent Task Force for Aviva, which Brendan mentioned in my introduction. And as part of that, I started working with Korn Ferry as a client, using Korn Ferry's approach to talent management. And part of my job was taking the Korn Ferry process for talent management and rewriting it and redesigning it for Aviva. And so I worked probably as a client very closely with Korn Ferry for maybe 4 or 5 years, something like that. And that involved working with some consultants from Korn Ferry, but also working with an internal Aviva team, running training programs up and down the country to enable people in the talent management process that we basically co-designed with Korn Ferry. And that, again, it was just a wonderful experience. So spent a lot of time doing that, and then got really interested in Korn Ferry, kept in touch with them, but just as a client. Then a big turning point for me was in 2008. Korn Ferry Aviva set up a North America region to be based out of Chicago. And my boss at the time was assigned to Chicago for 3 years, and she needed somebody to get the talent management program set up in Chicago. And so she offered me a short-term 3-month assignment, which turned into 4, based in Chicago, which was hugely exciting. What an opportunity that was, to be able to go over to Chicago for 4 months to get the talent management process set up for Aviva North America, the new region that they'd set up. And so I worked very closely with her, worked in Toronto, which was one of the main offices there, and also in Iowa, just enabling people again on talent management, but also running the talent management cycle for Aviva North America. And it was just fabulous. I absolutely fell in love with Chicago. It was an amazing city. I think I loved it from the minute I got off the plane. It was tremendous. And so when it was almost time to come back in the October of 2008, a very senior colleague of mine in the UK came over to Chicago for an interview for the top job, basically, for Aviva North America in HR. And so I offered to take her out for dinner, and took the opportunity to talk to her about the fact that if an opportunity came up for a long-term assignment, then I wanted to do that. And so she listened, and she said, well, when I get back to the UK, she said, come and talk to me. So I did. And I went to talk to her, and fast forward a little while, in the January of 2009, and I got a phone call from my boss in the UK and said, are you sitting down? She said, how do you fancy 3 years in Chicago? And so I went home, and my husband at the time and I talked about it, and I think it took us about 5 seconds to decide that we were going to take the opportunity. And then I started working for Aviva North America on a 3-year secondment. I think it was in something like the March of 2009. And that was just amazing. It was really, really hard work. There were several of us who were sent over to North America, who were all specialists in our field, but we needed to get the region set up, basically. And so, as Brendan said, I went over as Vice President of Talent, Engagement and Mobility. So my role had expanded significantly from what it had been in the UK. I took on the engagement survey in addition to talent management. And also I managed other secondments, the international secondments, which was a real challenge, very, very complex, but it was a good challenge. It really, really stretched me. So I did that role for 3 years and decided I wanted to stay and in Chicago. And so I applied for a green card, got my green card, and had just got my green card when there was a change of leadership in Aviva, and the regional operating model was disbanded. So I had a choice at that point. I could either come back to York to have another job with Aviva UK, or I could stay in the States because I had my green card with no job. So this was a really, really big decision for my husband and I, because he wasn't working at the time. He didn't have a degree, and it's really difficult to get a job wearing a suit in the States if you don't have a degree. So we sat up all night and weighed up the pros and cons of what we were going to do, because we had this huge opportunity to stay in the States, but I was losing my job and he didn't have a job, and we'd just bought a house. So it was a massive decision. And we just weighed up all the pros and cons, literally did a balance sheet of the pros and the cons, and thought, well, what's the worst that can happen? And thought, well, we just go home. If it doesn't work out, we just go home. So we decided to stay. I took redundancy from Aviva, and I spent the whole, that was in the June of 2012 when I finished with Aviva, and I spent the whole of that summer, well, 3 months that summer, applying for jobs and basically treated it like a business. I was at my desk 7 hours a day selling, again, as I'd been at the Yorkshire Post, but selling me as the product. And I was 100% committed to it. And I contacted Korn Ferry and said, look, I've had a great relationship with Korn Ferry. I've loved learning from Korn Ferry and being part of the work that you do as a client, and I'd really like to work for Korn Ferry. And then I got a call in September, and there was a job, and it was in intellectual property development, which basically means writing all of the stuff that Korn Ferry owns and sells to clients, so books and tools and papers and surveys and things like that, and creating all of that intellectual property. And there was an opportunity, so I started with Korn Ferry in October 2012, and it has been an amazing opportunity for me. So I was still in Chicago, working in what used to be called the Sears Tower, the Willis Tower. That's where my office was. It used to be one of the tallest buildings in the world. Incredibly exciting place to work, and I was downtown Chicago, and it was just huge. It was everything that you would expect it to be in terms of excitement. I loved it. Absolutely wonderful. And grew my career and became senior director of intellectual property development for Korn Ferry a few years ago. And I'd got divorced in the meantime, but didn't change my name because I was published as Heather Barnfield, not Heather Hurst, as I was when I was at St John's. So kept my name, and I've had various things published under that name since then. So then of course COVID hit in 2020, and I immediately started working from home. I lived in the city of Chicago, so I wasn't far away from the office, but couldn't go into the office. Worked from home, and over the next couple of years did probably, I think, 3 or 4 long trips back to the UK. I really started to miss people. I think COVID changed things for a lot of people. I think it made us all reassess everything, and it was a very soul-searching time for me. So I did 3 long trips back to the UK, which was incredibly challenging. I mean, I came back for 5 weeks because I could work from anywhere. That was the one good thing about COVID. I could work from anywhere. So I came back for 5 weeks and took partially holiday and then worked the rest of the time, and spent that 5 weeks in York and did that several times. And each time I did that, it started to get harder and harder to go back to the States, and I just knew that this was where I wanted to be. And so I in 2021 spoke to my boss and said, look, I need to be back in the UK. I've been in the States for 13 years and I just knew I needed to come home. So she spoke to the leadership team, and apparently it took them about 20 seconds to decide that it was okay for me to come back and keep my job, because it really didn't matter, and still doesn't matter where I work. We're all in the Korn Ferry Institute, which is the part of Korn Ferry I work for, which is about a team of about 33 people serving an organisation of 11,000. We're all remote, so it doesn't really matter where we are at all. So I moved back to the UK last year in July, back to York, and still do the same job that I did for all those years working from Chicago, and it was a great decision to come home. So and here I am. So that's the journey that I've been on. One thing I didn't mention in all of that is that a few years after I'd left St John's, I actually did a postgrad in human resource management, which was really critical, because had I not done that, I probably couldn't have got to the States, because their qualification's mad in the States, and if you don't have a postgrad or a master's, then it's really, really difficult to get a posting over there. So I should have mentioned that. So yeah, so I'm back in York, still loving the job that I do. I have no intention of retiring yet, and just having a lot of fun. So that is the career journey that I've been on. So it's been really varied, really interesting. I've had some great opportunities and have seized all of those opportunities, and still as enthusiastic about what I do as I ever was. And just I'm really, really grateful for everything that's happened. So there you go, Brendan. That's my career journey.
Heather, thank you so much. Absolutely fascinating to hear the journey you've been on and the variety of roles that you've had, but also how that's developed and the places that's taken you to as well. So thank you so much for sharing that with us. And you were speaking so fondly of your time in Chicago. And oh my goodness, I hope you're having just as much as a good time in York. And it sounds like you are, and you're happy to be back in York, which is.
Do you know, so many people have asked me since I came back, well, don't you miss it? It must have been so exciting being in Chicago. And it was wonderful. And I'm really, really grateful for that experience, but I'm so glad to be home. I do not miss Chicago one bit. I'm just so glad to be home. There really is nothing like home. And of course, the connection for me, I'd never lived in York before since I'd been at St. John's. I'd worked in York working for Aviva, but I'd always lived in Leeds when I was working for Aviva. So, but my heart has always been in York because of my time at St. John's.
Brilliant. Well, that's great.
This is the place to come back for me.
That's really great to hear. And I mean, I've got loads of questions, some that have been pre-prepared and loads that I kind of come up with as I've been hearing and listening to your presentation. But I suppose going back to your time at York St. John, you said that university wasn't something that was initially on your radar, and you met somebody who'd encouraged you to apply. So what was it about York St. John that appealed to you at that time? And what changed your mind about going to university?
Well, two things. One is, and this has always stuck with me, and I think this is quite significant. One was a teacher, my favourite teacher in the sixth form, found out that I was thinking about not bothering going to university, and he said to me, why are you not going to go? I said, well, I just haven't really thought about it. He said, well, why not go? And I thought, well, okay, why not? And it literally was as simple as that. I just kind of fell into it. And then the person who I knew who was a lecturer, a guy called Keith Pullum, again, it was just kind of, I thought, well, I kind of got into the mindset that I maybe did want to go to university, couldn't really be bothered to think about or applying for all of these different universities. So the only one I applied for was the one that he was at, that was St. John's, and that was it. It was literally as simple as that.
Yeah.
And thank God, because it was the best decision for me. What a wonderful, wonderful college. Oh my God, could not have been better. And anybody of my cohort will tell you that. Anybody.
That's absolutely. And you say that your time during the time at York St. John, your 4 years, you made the best of every opportunity that was available to you. So what did those 4 years give you in terms of those opportunities?
Oh my God, I mean, I just grew up so much. I mean, I was a young 18-year-old when I went to college, and I just threw myself into everything. I was very sociable, and just absolutely enjoyed the experience, loved the experience. And it built my confidence so much. I mean, even I look at pictures of me now in the first year compared to me in the fourth year. It's like I grew up 10 years in that 4 years. Just leaving home at what was such a young age, and never living back at home again, but just absolutely embracing everything and being in the middle. I was always in the middle of everything. I had to be in the middle of everything, and it was just hugely character building for me. It was a fantastic foundation.
Brilliant. And in terms of those transferable skills that you've taken from your degree, how has that helped you over your career journey so far?
The one big thing for me was, well, two things that are related: confidence and relationship building. I've said to several people that all of the success I've had throughout my career has been built on the relationships that I forged right from day one. And I learned that at St. John's, because it was such a sociable place. And so, I can all the routes that I've taken, the opportunities I've had, it's all been about that ability to collaborate and to forge those relationships. So people have known me, I've made myself known because I've had the confidence to do that. And people have remembered me, and I've had those opportunities not offered to me, but when I've put myself forward for them, I've been in a great position to take advantage of those opportunities. So that's, and I know that that's the experience I had at St John's was the foundation of that.
Brilliant. And I think you've hit an important point there about, you know, your networks and relationships that you build. And you know, even our current students, we talk about the importance of building those networks, getting yourself known with employers, getting that experience, because as you've demonstrated for your own career journey, that having those networks and those relationships have been really fundamental in taking you places that perhaps might not have been there if you hadn't had those networks.
Yeah, definitely. Oh, without a doubt. I would never, that was one of the things that got me to America. You know, I never ever could have anticipated that opportunity, but because I was known and I was well known for what I was doing and had built up a really good reputation, I was one of the people chosen to do it, and I was so fortunate.
Yeah, brilliant. Fascinated to hear about your time in the newspaper industry, because you were there from the 1990s to the early 2000s, in a time that the newspaper industry changed probably the most it had ever changed in terms of print media coming in, and then we saw towards the latter time of your time in the newspaper industry the rise of social media coming. I mean, what was that like to experience that change in the industry at that time?
Oh, I mean, it was I started at the right time and left at the right time, because I started in the middle of it being really vibrant, really successful, really exciting, and I left just before it all started to go wrong, because regional newspapers are dependent on advertising. That's what keeps them going. It's not the cover price, it's the advertising. And I remember the first time I was in a board meeting, and I remember the first time that I heard the word eBay. No idea what it meant. And then, of course, once I'd heard it, I never stopped hearing about it. And eBay finished advertising, certainly classified advertising in newspapers. And that was the beginning of the end. In fact, the building, the purpose-built building that housed the Yorkshire Post in Leeds is razed to the ground. It doesn't exist anymore, and it's very sad when I drive past there and I just see the clock tower that they decided to leave, and the rest of the building's gone, and it's sad. But I was so lucky to have been there at the peak of it all, really.
Yeah, I can imagine what a time to be in the industry as it was changing that much. Something else that struck me about your talk was you mentioned a couple of times sort of the interview process. You know, that those 15 interviews over 5 months for Aviva. You know, what an intensive process that must have been. But then also when you were looking for work back in Chicago, you treated it as a full-time job. You know, you were selling yourself. Can you say a bit more about that? About how did you prepare for that interview process? What sort of tips would you give somebody, you know, a recent graduate who's looking for a job, in terms of preparing themselves the best they can? Because it is very competitive. It's very hard, particularly at the moment, in terms of finding work. What would be your tips or advice for anyone doing that at the moment?
Well, I think the fact that I started my career in sales, I mean, sales is a fantastic foundation because it really makes you tougher. You have to grow up when you sales, especially when you're cold calling. And so I knew that when I was looking for a job, and I had to find a job because we had no income, right, at that point. And our whole existence in the States depended on me getting a job. So the first thing was I had that huge incentive. Right. And I think you have to have a really good reason to want to either work for a particular company or in a particular field. And I had that fantastic reason because I needed the income. But it was about remembering that I had to sell me. Right. Yeah. I treated myself as a product. And so every conversation I had over the phone or whether it was face to face, I was always cognizant of that. And so it was always about being incredibly well prepared, making sure that I knew about not only the company but the person I was meeting. And of course these days it's much easier to find out about people because everything's on the internet, so there was no excuse whatsoever for going into interview not being really well prepared. But then it's just about putting your best foot forward. But I remember you asked specifically about the interviewing process for Aviva, and I remember distinctly my final interview. I'd had so many interviews, and my final interview with the guy that was going to be my boss. And he was very, very down to earth. I'm very, very blunt, very direct, very down to earth. And we had a real rapport. And I said, look, Paul, I said, here it is. I said, I'm not actually sure what you're looking for in this role. So I'm now going to tell you who I am and what I would bring. And if that's not what you want, then I shouldn't be in this role. But I felt so confident because of the rapport that we'd built up to be able to tell him that. So I said, right, this is who it is. And he just looked at me and he said, nice one. And then I got the job. So, right. But I'm not suggesting that everybody does that, because it wouldn't always work. But the reason I'm saying that is it's about being intuitive and reading into the person who is interviewing you, and you have to really assess, how can I be with this person? Yeah. And I would not have been that with anybody else, but I just knew with him that I could be that blunt. So you really have to intuit and be cognizant of how you should be conducting yourself. And all interviews are different. There is no one size fits all with interviewing and going for jobs. There really isn't, I don't think, anyway.
Absolutely really good some advice there, so thank you for that. But I wonder if you could say a bit more about your transition from working in the UK to the US. I mean, you spoke so fondly of your time in Chicago, but what was it like from a working perspective, going from working in the UK to then going over to the US?
Well, I'll mention something first of all about why I wanted to do it. I spent quite a bit of time in the States before I went over there. So again, it was about the incentive for me that I really wanted to do it. And also, as a client of Korn Ferries, when I was still working for Aviva, I'd had the opportunity to talk at conferences in San Diego and Chicago and New York before I even went to work for Korn Ferry. So having that time there, I knew I wanted to be there. But it was about, once I decided I wanted to do that, I was on a mission. And I just did everything I could to make it happen, hence taking my future boss out for dinner to position the conversation with her. But the one thing I must mention, though, is it was hugely risky, because there was one point where we didn't know whether everything was going to work out and that the region development was going to go ahead. So before I even got to the States, I had to make a decision. Am I going to take this risk? And the reason I'm mentioning that is I think if you want to do an international assignment, be aware that it is a risk. You've got to really, really want it, but you've got to really think about what the opportunity is. And I was just prepared to do it. And I'm really, really glad that I did. And I think particularly now, my advice to people would be, if you have the opportunity to work abroad and you want to do it, because, and particularly if it's sponsored by a company, because particularly with the States, it's very difficult, really difficult to get to work in the States unless you're sponsored by a company. So if you have the opportunity, what's the worst that can happen? That's what my husband and I thought when, we thought about staying. What is the worst that can happen? You can always come back. But you may not love it all of the time, but you will have some fantastic memories, and it is a really unique experience to work abroad, and just amazing, absolutely amazing. There's downsides to it, but it's hugely developmental, definitely, and very exciting.
Yeah, I can absolutely imagine. And how are you finding it now? So working for a company abroad whilst being back in the UK, how's that transition back been for you?
For me, because of the work that I do, it's been really, really easy, because I didn't have any direct colleagues. As I mentioned, I work for the Korn Ferry Institute, which is basically the research and development department of Korn Ferry. There were no other people in the Chicago office who were part of that team. And so whilst, I knew people in the office, I wasn't directly working with anybody. So I more and more started to work from home, even when I was in Chicago and before COVID hit. So I was already working remotely a lot anyway, then of course completely once COVID hit. So from a work point of view, it really doesn't make that much difference. And some of the teams that I work with are in the UK, some are in the Netherlands. I've got a colleague in Singapore. We're all over the place anyway. The biggest difference is the time difference, because nobody's online until 2 o'clock, which in theory gives me all morning to get stuff done. And I actually really like that. And I love the flexibility of that. And if I choose to work from 11 till 9 at night, then I can do that. So I have that flexibility. So it's actually worked out really well. The one thing that I miss, that I think a lot of people tell you who work completely remotely, is the human contact. I mean, I spend most of my afternoon is doing this on Zoom with people all over the world, having meetings with them. But I just miss being in a room with something with a heartbeat, you know. I really miss that contact, but you kind of get used to it. But I'm glad I'm not doing this earlier in my career. I'm really thankful I had all of those decades of traveling all over the country and meeting people and spending face-to-face time with people for so long. I wouldn't want to have done this my entire career at all.
What advice would you give a graduate who perhaps wants to work in a similar environment to Korn Ferry?
I would say, if you have an opportunity to do an internship, take it. For example, we have some 4 interns starting for the institute this week, actually, and some internships are unpaid. We pay our interns quite a lot, and so I don't know how many interns Korn Ferry takes on a year, but if you have an opportunity of an internship, take it, because we also have a policy of hiring a lot of those interns. So we get the opportunity to test people out, they test us out. So that would be my first point of advice. I would also say that if you want to work in a consulting environment, it's hard work, whatever you're doing. I mean, we do executive search, we do advisory consulting, we do all sorts of different things, but whatever you're doing, it's hard work, it's long hours. You need to be very committed, but it's also incredibly rewarding. But you need to be flexible. So it's a very exciting environment to work in, but it is hard work, and you know, don't shy away from that. But I think that those were the main points of advice for the kind of environment that I'm in.
Brilliant. That's really helpful. And now that you're back in York, have you been back to the campus?
Oh yes, it was the first day that I did. Of course, I regularly go back to the campus. Just to walk around. I mean, it's so evocative for me. I walk into the quad in my 4th year. My room it was on a corridor called school, which is now offices, and it looked down onto the quadrangle. And sometimes I'll just stand in the quad and just look up, and all the memories come back. So I regularly go back, and it breaks my heart to see that the Union building is not there anymore, because that was the heart and soul of my 4 years there, and it's not there, which is really sad. And we also had a reunion. We organised a reunion last year. Me and some friends organised a reunion for 165 people, and it was amazing.
Fantastic.
So I'm very wedded to it. I'm still in contact with a lot of people from my college days.
That's good. That's good. I mean, the campus has changed, as you say. It's changed
it's
so
beautiful.
much.
What a great job they've done. It's fabulous.
Yeah. What would be your favourite memory from your time at York St John?
The people, without a doubt, the people. You know, the fact that I still have my closest friends is somebody I lived with at college. You know, the fact that I still have so many great relationships with people from all of those years ago. I mean, clearly we had a big gap where we didn't see each other, and a lot of the recontact has been through social media. But the fact that we can just get on just as we did then, it was all about the people and those relationships. And it comes back to this theme, the relationships, you see. And I feel really fortunate to have all of that. And you know, nobody's changed. Not really.
I imagine the reunion last summer was incredible to see everybody
again. It was amazing. So we're doing it again next year.
Oh, good. Brilliant.
Yeah.
Well, Heather, it really has been so enjoyable talking to you today and hearing about your career journey, but also the advice that you've given to our graduates as well is incredibly helpful. So thank you so much for your time, and hopefully I might get to see you on campus when you're next at York St John. But thanks again.
I'll find you out. I'll dig you out. I'll come and see you. How about that?
Take you for a drink in the New Students' Union.
Oh, okay, right. Oh, and it's a nice building. We went in there, and it is nice.
Yeah,
it's nice, I must say that. So I'll be really happy to, if anybody emails with any questions, I will answer anything. So
brilliant. Right, we can share your details when we put this video out. But really, thank you so much for your time. It's been really great to.
Thanks, Brendan. I've loved reliving all of this. It's just fantastic. So thank you for inviting me.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.